Coming up on this episode of Once a Duck.
There's no detail too small, like, because those little details add up. And if you start to, flack on your details, and all of a sudden you've created a huge deficit.
All that and more coming up on this episode of the Once a Duck podcast.
Where's your favorite place to take college game day? And I say every time, Eugene, Oregon.
Folks, welcome back into another episode of the Once a Duck podcast. I'm Sam Schmidt. Here with me, as always, the one, the only, the very properly dressed today, Nick Cody. Nick, how you doing, buddy?
Well, I'm dressed for a funeral as we have to mourn the undefeated streak Oregon has had in the Big Ten. As we all know, Oregon lost 30-20 to Indiana. There's a lot to talk about, a lot to break down, but first and foremost, I got to tell all of you out there where you can find us. If you aren't already following us at Once a Duck, you can find me and Sam individually out on our social media at Nick R. Cody or at Samuel101TS. And Sam, man, it was an interesting game because I don't think I ever quite lost hope, even when I feel like I should have. It felt like there was something about this that just told me, hey, the second half especially, our offense will start clicking, but it never really did. Truly, the zone defense of Indiana came out, gave us a lot of problems getting a lot of downfield passing and being comfortable in the pocket. And from the very first set of the very first offensive snap, basically all the keys that we had to winning this game kind of all went downhill from there. Sack on the very first play, got 6 sacks, I believe, by the end. I started to lose count because you know how I am with sacks. And yeah, by the end, this Oregon team felt not just like losing the game, but it really felt like we weren't prepared the right way for this team. And at least, the coaches, their narrative has been that such that they aren't too happy with their game plan. But overall, we saw even more Big Ten style game than we had against Penn State, and Oregon didn't come out on the right end of it. What did you take away from it, Sam?
Well, man, Nick, I'll tell you what, being in that stadium, I think you absolutely nailed the vibe of this one, which was everybody seemed to be waiting for this game to kick into gear for this Oregon team, whether it was the fans in the stands or even the players out on the field, the coaching staff. It seemed like everybody was just waiting for that moment where everything kicks into gear and starts being the Oregon football that we know and love. And it never really happened. I mean, you had the one touchdown in the game, which was early on. It ended up being because of a really beautiful design that was able to get Malik Benson open downfield, was able to get the safety out of position. But beyond that, there was really not a lot of the type of Oregon football that I think everybody's come to appreciate and love from this team. Very minimal downfield attacking, very minimal, especially in the second half, doing work to establish the run. And I think those are all things that the coaching staff has acknowledged were definitely an issue. And as someone who's in the stands, I can tell you, it felt as if the whole time the entire game plan was being held back just a little bit by what was happening consistently on first down. It seemed like this game, more than any other all season, Oregon was having a really difficult time getting drives started, whether that was because of sacks, whether that was because of difficulties in the run game. And I know we're going to get in a lot more into all of those, but it really felt like a day where no matter what, everyone just was waiting for that moment to get engaged and get going, and it never really happened.
Yeah, that and just the guys that we had involved and who we ended up getting the ball distribution to. I remember at halftime everybody saying, all right, we got to get Sadiq the ball more. And then you come out on that first drive, you make a clear intent to get him the ball, and then where does it go? And that was it felt like that same way with the rushing performance from Davison. I would have loved to see him get a couple more touches because it felt like when the rock was in his hands, I know he's been saying that he's a great, red zone back, but man, he's able to plow, for extra yardage, get out of tackles. Like, you need that when your offensive line isn't necessarily getting the push or as locked down as they need to be. And man, give it up to Indiana. Their linebackers played just really, really good instinctive football, and they're making plays all over the place.
Well, and I think the thing that stuck out to me, especially looking at that Indiana defense, was just that all the things we said could potentially be a problem were very much a problem. The zone defense, the simulated pressure, the athletic linebackers, the strong interior defensive line, all of them came to play in such a massive way for this Indiana team. And it really didn't seem like Oregon was as prepared for it as you would hope a team would be, especially a team coming out of a bye week. I know you mentioned it on the podcast last week, Nick. Dan Lanning had said that he had wanted to take it a little bit easier on the bye week. You could kind of tell, man, the first half, this didn't look like a team that was super interested in the type of aggressive football that's necessary to win in the Big Ten. And in the second half, after Oregon had kind of done it to themselves a little bit in the first half, Indiana recognized the position they were in, and they absolutely took over.
It wasn't even, not just the team. I really felt like the entire, at least from my perspective and watching there at GameWorks, Autzen felt a little bit down at points, and I think a lot of that credit goes to Indiana, and they had to get themselves out of some tough situations where the crowd was absolutely affecting them, especially, in terms of penalties. But I think especially once Cignetti lost his shit on the referees, it completely kind of changed the course of that game because, yeah, the fans, hate to see that, but he had a damn good point to be mad at that. I think everybody watching those replays is sitting there going, yeah, Ducks kind of got away with murder. I get it. And then it came to kind of bite us when they were able to get the rhythm in their passing game. And it wasn't even necessarily – a lot of the narrative I see out there is, oh man, Indiana just came out there and out physicaled them. No, I think it was absolutely they were physical enough, but they out executed us. Man, and credit to those wide receivers, especially Surratt. That guy was fantastic at being able to break off the coverage and snap his route tree right off at the sideline. And that's really like what we saw with the Dunze at Washington a couple years ago. When you're able to do that and pose a deep threat as well, it is really, really dangerous football because you can pick up those third downs very, very easily if you have that connection and timing and just give your quarterback, 3 seconds.
Well, and Elijah Surratt, as you mentioned, 8 catches, 121 yards, also that game-sealing touchdown as well. He was really, really impressive in this game. And to be honest, Indiana came in with a great game plan. They knew exactly how to attack this Oregon defense. Brandon Finney Jr. is awesome on the side he's on. You saw him make a tremendous play, getting that pick 6. But beyond that, they recognize that with Oregon's aggressive man defense, you're going to have opportunities with those timing routes and on those little comebacks toward the sideline, those outside shoulder kind of throws. Those will be there for you against this team, and they absolutely took advantage of it. Omar Cooper Jr., he was also really good in this game, 7 catches for 58 yards. And then again, Roman Hemby also, he only had 2 catches for 25 yards, but they were both big ones.
Yeah. And again, another factor, College Game Day being there. I know it's like, man, I had weird feelings during multiple segments of that broadcast. I believe first and foremost, I'm going to put some of the blame here, and I will be the only one. I believe this is going to be the most unique take in Ducks podcasting right now, Sam. I put this one on Matt Carney. Okay. I like coming home once on game day. Once. I only want to hear it once. If it comes on in the stadium, good. But if he's going to perform it live that morning, like do a different song or we got to cut it out of the game. If you hear it twice, I'm sorry. I don't need to be crying at 6 a.m. in the morning. So coming home once on game day, let's limit it to that. And I think we'll be doing a whole lot better from now on in Autzen Stadium. The other one is, I love Coach Lanning. I love his enthusiasm. I want him to be him. But, man, keep the shirt on. Let McAfee do all that. that moment I was like, all right, I'm not liking my prediction quite as much as I was anymore.
Well, look, credit to Dan Lanning. He's one of those guys, he's always going to engage. He's always going to want to be a part of things like that. I remember when he went on the show, when Oregon played at Utah a couple of years ago, people were surprised to see him on there. And what Oregon do? They came out and dominated in that game. The issue, though, and I do agree, is that in retrospect, it's a tough look. It's a tough look to be the guy who's taking his shirt off and yelling at 6 a.m. and then at 2 p.m. your team is sputtering out of control. That's not a great look. Big Dan Lanning guy right here, but yeah, that's probably not the best look you can have for that one. I will say, College Game Day to Autzen atmosphere, it was solid, and this does need to be brought up. I will say, CBS is known for turning down crowd volume a little bit. They're known for turning down the crowd volume a little bit because they have two of the best announcers in the sport. Fair. They're so good at what they do. And yeah, you want to be able to hear what they're doing. You want to be able to hear those legendary voices. And so I think that it did maybe seem a little bit more muted than it was at times. I'll say that there were some big third downs where the crowd was absolutely losing it. But to Indiana's credit, they were making plays in those moments. Specifically, credit to Fernando Mendoza. There were a number of times during that game where it seemed like all options were eliminated except for him, and then he would go make the kind of play, whether it was go picking up a first down, picking up a big chunk, and setting up an easier third down. That happened repeatedly, and almost every single time Oregon fans were able to cause a pre-snap penalty, which there were 6 of in this game. Let's not forget about there were 6 pre-snap penalties in this game. A good 4 or 5 false starts out of that bunch. Indiana was able to bounce back from those mistakes. Those long yardage situations really didn't hurt them in the way that it would generally hurt a lot of other teams. And as we mentioned, having the receivers they do and running the kind of routes they were against this Oregon team were a big part of what helped that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in terms of our offense, we weren't really able to get those plays, and I can't blame necessarily Dante. There are definitely moments he missed, but there was definitely from the very first snap, the, integrity and security of the pocket is already in question. So it was a tough day for our offense. That second half, man, that was tough to watch. And everybody says, oh, it's too much of the bubble screen or what. If you're looking at what the defense is giving you and what your game plan is that week, I mean, there's only so much you can do about it, but you are trying to establish more and spread that defense out. But they were already on top of everything we were trying to do. I really just thought the effort up front wasn't what I wanted to see, especially, man, some of the penalties we didn't need, some of the times where guys were knocking each other off of blocks instead of working in unison as a tandem and a combo. There was specifically one time, I think it might have been a 4th down specifically, I saw Poncho get stepped on, and you're just like, come on guys, just get those hips together and keep your feet moving. And we know we have the talent to be able to push those guys around, but when you're not able to get on the same page, that those little things just, man, they add up into big plays for the other team. And yeah, Indiana just had way more of them. And honestly, when we had the interception pick 6, it really felt like, all right, here's the time they're going to flip it on. Just weren't able to. And congrats to Indiana if that was on them. And, if it's on the Ducks, I hope they're able to get it figured out. And it sounds like from everything that's been in the media and from those guys at the press conference this week, I feel confident in it.
Well, addressing 2 different things you said there, the latter first and then the former. You're right. Oregon had that interception, and that was one of the most exciting game break moments I can remember at Autzen for a long time. That includes games last year against Ohio State. That includes a lot of big games. The crowd went nuts for that moment. It was finally the breakthrough everybody needed, but all the credit in the world to Indiana. How did they respond to that? 12 plays, 75 yards, 6 minutes and 19 seconds off the clock, and ended with that Surratt touchdown on the outside. Again, really quickly also, while mentioning that, a lot of Oregon fans and a lot of people online possibly correctly so, saying, hey, that looked like it was a push-off right there. I got to tell you something, though. If you're not fully extending the arms, that's rarely going to be called. They're rarely going to call that if you don't have a full arm extension. It wasn't fully extended. He did a good job. And to be honest, they were letting those guys play a lot all game. Yeah. Both coaches were upset about it. They were letting them go on both sides a significant amount. And that's the kind of thing that's going to happen in those games, especially when you have the caliber of wide receivers that Indiana does. We said this was going to be the best downfield passing attack Oregon had played all season. It would be the best downfield passing attack Oregon played all season until maybe USC later in the year. That absolutely came to fruition. That was 100% true. To the first thing you said, often on this podcast, we have said the phrase 5 as 1. 5 as one, be a cohesive unit moving that way. And that just really wasn't the case in this game. Whether that is because of these guys having a difficult time working together, whether that was because of some protection issues, which are somewhat on them, also somewhat on Dante. We heard it in the postgame. We heard it in Dan Lanning's press conference this week. There were certain things and reads that he was not making correctly that he should have made or could have made that would have made things a lot easier. Heck, that first sack is a great example of the simulated pressure we talked about on the last episode. Their linebackers, I believe, accounted for 4.5 of the 6 sacks total. It was something that was very difficult for this Oregon team to deal with. And if you're going to be playing against these aggressive defenses that the Big Ten is known for, you have to have everybody, all 5 linemen, as well as your quarterback, as well as your running backs, as well as your tight ends, all on the same page protection-wise. Very clearly, Oregon wasn't.
Yep, and that kind of goes for the same side, to briefly mention the other side of the football there. Also got to stay in those passing lanes. I mean, we did a great job as a defensive line pre-snap, getting a lot of those, combined with the sound of Autzen Stadium, getting a lot of those pre-snap penalties. But, man, when you guys, when we have the pass rushing talent we have to just be able to let the quarterback be able to just, kind of scamper, for an easy first down on third down, that's tough. You got to have, especially with the athleticism we have of these guys, you have to be able to maintain your lane and not fully commit to giving up that interior right there and be able to push the pocket the right way. And then obviously the third element we got to talk about, they outperformed us in special teams. Their kicker, comes out and has, a record-setting kick for Autzen Stadium. And then, Atticus Sappington misses a 36-yarder at the end of the first half. And then they had our punt scouted out pretty good. It looked like we were potentially looking for that scramble or run out of the, kind of the Australian football-style rugby punt. And instead, they had it scouted, and a couple times it looked like we were looking at it, but no, it was covered. We're going to kick it. And that's definitely a weapon we got to utilize more in those kind of games that are going to come down to, the points being that meaningful. And yeah, that the momentum of that missed kick really, I think, influenced that middle 8 more than anything else.
Well, I think in that first half, there were 3 big moments where Oregon really hurt themselves, right? You can go through them in order. Number 1, on that opening drive, the pass to Noah Whittington over the middle, he probably can fall forward, dive there, pick up a first down if he just heads straight forward. Instead, he tries to play a little bit more lateral, get around a guy for a bigger play. Oregon ends up failing to pick up 4th down on that exact set of downs. If you're able to pick up a first down there, the offense is able to keep moving, new set of downs, things are looking much cleaner. Second play I want to mention, because it was right in front of me, man. Johnson's drop on what should have been just a really easy first down pickup. Oregon moving toward the red zone, everything's moving nicely. If you're able to pick up a first down there, who knows what you're able to do? Drain some more clock, score a touchdown right before halftime. All of a sudden at 17-10, you're looking good. Instead, if you don't pick it up, you opt for the field goal. What happens? You miss a field goal. There's enough time for Indiana to drive, hit a 58-yarder. Again, all the credit in the world to the kicker there. 58 yards for Frankie. That's a big kick right there, especially from a guy who over his career hasn't had a whole lot of cracks at it. He had drained that one, and that's a 6-point swing right there. That's a massive 6-point swing in what ended up being a 10-point ball game. If you're able to have a 3-point lead there going into half, even after that first Dante interception, you're still only down 1 score late with an opportunity to go make something happen. That you were absolutely right to point that out, because those 3 moments specifically, what Oregon ended up doing in that middle 8, that really ended up hurting this team.
Yep. And in terms of hurting this team, and I know, the team can't really talk about bigger picture, but overall looking at this, the overall discussion now changes a little bit. Maybe, again, there's so much after last year's letdown in the Rose Bowl, a lot of talk about, hey, well, now potentially you don't have control of your path to the Big Ten championship, but there's still the opportunity right there in your control to get to the playoffs. The problem is the list of teams you play from here on out really isn't impressive enough if you have any more losses from here on out. So it's not going to be in your hands if you don't pick things up from here on out and make sure you take care of business the rest of the way. And with that, also the potential for a home game in Autzen would be nice to get that cleaned up. And yeah, again, now your path to the Big Ten championship isn't necessarily in your hands. But if you take care of business the rest of the way, I imagine Indiana's going to face Ohio State on their schedule, playing everything out. Penn State, we obviously don't have to worry about seeing again. Yeah, it's an interesting time in college football. It's crazy how fast things change week to week. And, again, anybody that's been around and fans as long as we have, my recruiting year, saw Dennis Dixon, and as simple as that. That's how quick college football can change on you, not just for one team, but the entire ranking system right there, and all the top 25 can be completely thrown into chaos. And if you look at it from week 0 to week now, man, there's some glaring omissions, aren't there, Sam?
I mean, this sport is changing so rapidly, even year to year. I mean, for years and years and years, one loss was it, man. That was a wrap. That was done. And maybe you get a crazy year like 2007 was, where you get a couple of teams with a loss in a national championship. That so rarely happened, though. Almost every single year, it was an undefeated versus a one loss, or it was an undefeated versus an undefeated. You introduce the 4-team playoff system. Great. 2 losses still means you're done. It's over. It's wraps. Even if you have one, that might not be good enough still. Now that you're at a 12-team playoff format, you can't afford a loss. And I'm going to go out on a limb here. You might even be able to afford 2 if you're in the Big Ten or the SEC. That's kind of what's happened with this monopolization of the power in college football. Yeah, if you're in the ACC or if you're in the Big 12, 2 losses, that might end up being a death sentence. But if you're in the Big Ten, if you're in the SEC, almost all of your 2-loss teams should be able to sneak in there at this point, given you never know exactly how things are going to turn out on the schedule. But if you're Ohio State, if you're Indiana, you're both just rubbing your hands right now knowing, hey, if we got to play each other, it's going to be in Indianapolis for a Big Ten championship game. That's something that they are both have to be so excited about. Do I think that's necessarily going to be the matchup come December? At this point, yes, I do. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be. But we all know how anything can happen. We all know how anything can change. Still waiting for Ryan Day to prove that he can beat Michigan. So we'll see how that works out come Thanksgiving weekend. But you are in a position now where you take a look at where Ohio State was last year, right? They didn't go to the Big Ten championship game. They won the national championship. So you're still just as in it as you ever were at this point. But now I think what has happened is that all of those glaring issues that I think we've kind of known could be there have been put under a microscope. Whether that's a good thing because it means this coaching staff can now really evaluate it and point it out to their team and look to improve it, or whether that's a bad thing and that every other team is going to try to take advantage of it. Regardless, it's out there.
Yeah. And again, we also have to take into account that it could just be, a number of factors that won't impede on us again. Maybe Dan Lanning adjusts from this, figures out the perfect way to handle a bye week, and we don't have the next one until before Washington.
Nick, the next I hate to be this guy. The next bye week is before going to Iowa.
All right. Well, it's not a home game, so at least I imagine we will really be adjusting that schedule then. So yeah,
we'll be wearing white. We haven't done that after a bye week with Dan Lanning for a while.
That's true. So, you say wearing white, but you never know.
At least the jersey. I don't know about anything else. At least the jersey's got to be. Iowa's not going to wear white at home.
Yeah. I'm saying, the rules, I believe you can get away with some, but we're not going to get into the details.
I don't think we're petitioning the Big Ten to wear yellow at Iowa.
Ooh, that wasn't even what I was thinking, but that would be great. That would be something. But anyways, the bigger thing is, again, bigger picture isn't for the team to worry about. It's for us to speculate about. It's fun to talk about. And now it's just interesting to see. I am at least enthused by the reaction by the coaches poll and the AP, Oregon not dropping very much. So, there's a part of me that goes, all right, we're going to lose a lot because, people don't respect Indiana, but at least Curt Cignetti really has that program getting the attention it really deserves for him coming in, bringing in a bunch of his own guys and doing it his way and being consistent.
Well, and look, we knew exactly the type of coaching job he could do. I didn't read off his resume last week on the podcast for no reason. He's kind of the man when he needs to be. And he really came to Oregon with such a great game plan, offense, defense, and frankly, on special teams. They knew what they were doing and knew what they were getting into in this game. Even credit to them. Yeah, they absolutely did scope out the potential fake punt there. They had watched the tape against Oregon State. They had a man who was ready for it. Also, though, we're probably not going to get into players of the game the way we normally would in this one, but I will say, James Ferguson-Reynolds, yeah, that was a really, really good adjustment on that play. Gotta love the Aussie style. In fact, in this game, 4 punts, 201 yards, 2 of them inside of the 20. That's averaging 50 yards a punt right there. That's some really, really good work. Beyond that, though, things are a little tougher if we're trying to find things to really be impressed by statistically. And I think that we aren't the only ones who would say such.
Well, I will give it up, though. No players of the game, but, you got to give a shout out to Brandon Finney Jr. I mean, dude,
if there was going to be another one, it's him.
He's and not only that, like, he's young, but man, he's ready to go. I want to see more of him, and I'll be definitely watching him a lot more after that play because that was exceptional. And sometimes, I get a little focused on the line play, but that's a kid that he's on my radar now for, man, the things he's going to be able to do in developing and get, against the talent that we saw Indiana's receivers to be able to do that and hang out there, man. Just fun to watch him, and he's going to get even better.
One more thing that I loved seeing from this, right? Corners, generally, very general here, not often the best tacklers on a team, yeah. Right? Of his 4 tackles, all 4 of them were solo. He was taking care of business by himself, bringing guys down to the ground by himself. He's not just a really good corner, really good coverage corner. He's also a guy that'll hit you and can bring you down and do a good job of doing that. He was really, really impressive in this game. And honestly, he wasn't thrown at a ton in this game. There was the one deep shot downfield that I can remember that he did a good job. Was it handsy? Yes, this whole game was. But he broke it up. And then he also had just an awesome read and undercut on that interception, was able to take it back to the house. The other side, though, was a little bit tricky. The other side was having a little bit of a hard time, whether it was Johnson, whether it was Iffy. They were both having a bit of a difficult time. And that's not to say that either one of these guys are not good players. They're both very capable. It's just that Indiana recognized that's going to be the weaker side. And if we put our big, strong wide receivers out there who are good at creating separation and are good at having contested catches, they were able to take advantage, man. They watched the tape. That's all I can say is this is a team that watched the tape. Now, I do want to get into a couple other things with you about this team as a whole. Before we do that, though, any other guys or moments you want to highlight?
No, only the guys in the that the camera panned to multiple times that were in the same duck shirt I was wearing last week with the matching hats. I just wanted to say I got that shout out at GameWorks, and then when those guys came up, everybody's going, "Oh, that shirt's so nice! It's my favorite shirt here." And when those guys came up on the TV multiple times, I was like, "Yeah, well, thanks, Amazon."
Well, taking a look at this team, a couple of the things I wanted to talk about offensively. I think that we can. Immediately, at least what I recognized in the stadium is that the zone defense from Indiana was causing problems. Obviously, it was causing problems in terms of the simulated pressure and being able to confuse Dante and the offensive line. But another thing that I noticed, when you're playing a zone defense, the timing routes are so important. And whether it's on the receiver being in the right place at the right time, or whether it's on Dante delivering the ball at the right time, there were several instances where they had those little pocket opportunities within that zone defense that they just weren't able to take advantage of. A ball was a little late. It was a little behind a guy. Somebody wasn't quite in the right place. And it seemed as if it was a significant issue for this Oregon team. The other thing, there are some tendencies this team really needs to be able to break. I think everybody knows at this point when 23 is on the field, he's running the ball and he's probably running it to the outside. That's something that people just know at this point. And when you have such a group of running backs that are all capable of such different things, there can be this issue where sometimes you'll fall into these tendencies a little bit. I think that's part of why there's a little bit of an issue right now with Oregon. He talking about it with quarterbacks all the time. If you have 2, it means you don't have 1. Maybe if you have 6, it means you don't have 1 or 2. Love to hear your thoughts on both.
Yeah, it's tricky. And when you have that much talent trying to find the hot hand every game is really, really important. Who has a rhythm and who's able to not only go out there and, establish themselves running, but who can read blocks, who's able to get that kind of feel for the game about how the offensive line is playing is so important because, the timing about the run game is really everything. And, you can have all the talent in the world, but if you're running past your blocks getting set up, you're not doing the team or yourself any favors. So there really is just kind of a feel for the game. And that's always been, something Coach Campbell I used to love. He was always kind of getting his guys in like the mindset of, hey, here's what we need from you in this situation and this situation. So when guys went into the game, they knew what to be prepared for and got used in a variety of ways. And sometimes it feels like we start trying to just continue to put guys in the same situations again and again and again. And again, when you put that on tape, it's it starts becoming a tendency that defenses can key in on more than it is, an advantageous thing to put your player in the best position.
I think another aspect of this offense that we have to talk about is just that getting yards on first down is so important. Getting yards on first down is so important because we saw in that second half, they only ran the ball 9 times. And that really, really showed itself in that Indiana knew it was coming. They were ready for it. They were prepared. They always had the moment. It seemed like after that 4th down non-conversion on the first drive, Oregon got a little bit hesitant about running those kind of run plays that have worked so well all year. The most productive thing the offense was doing in that game was running the ball straight ahead, right up the middle, and they really went away from it in some really key situations where they wouldn't opt instead to go for some of those screen passes and some of those bubble plays that had me saying, oh, man, some more side-to-side Stein, man, some more side-to-side Stein. I'm not saying that's bad. You need to space out. You need to be able to create those opportunities. But also at some point when the defense is flying like theirs was side to side and being able to cover those things, you really have to be able to at least threaten them downfield.
Yeah, and well, a lot of it is too familiarity, not just with the zone, but zone blitzes. And a lot of offensive coordinators have different ways of attacking zone blitz. And for us back in the day, it was, hey, if we feel too nervous about something and we anticipate running a play into blitz, especially anything with pulling guards, pulling your center especially, and you're anticipating a zone blitz, which means essentially somebody is probably going to be dropping into coverage from that defensive front, and you're going to have pressure from the other side and significant changes in gap responsibility from where everybody aligns. So what you definitely don't want to have in your run game is somebody able to pull into a gap right where a puller is coming out of and shoot up and be able to blow up a run play. So what we used to do is have a gang call, and that just reverted everything to a basic zone scheme. We knew if it was an outside run play, it was more of a mid-zone scheme, and if it was an inside play, it was an inside run zone scheme. So essentially everything started, first step, everybody in unison, and then, you matched up with whatever your call was based on alignment, and everybody worked through in tandem. If you don't have all 5 offensive linemen clued in on that and practicing it all week, or maybe that's just not your zone blitz breaker right there, that can be difficult. And for us, it was always really, really successful because it was the base and stapler of our offense. We just reverted back to whatever our base rule set was. And when you're able to do that and you do it confidently, especially with the adjustment in tempo, something I want to quickly comment on, which we tried to tempo them and they were completely well prepared for. And that's another thing about zone defense that's great because you can have limited calls because all your defensive, back end, all eyes are on the quarterback. You're not manned up with a guy and focused on them. So everybody's watching the play develop, following the football. And when you run a little bit more tempo, you typically tend to cut away some of the window dressing that actually gives you those advantages, the motions, the play action fakes, those types of things really suck in a zone defense so you can throw over the top of them. And when you're not able to do that and get first down yards, that tempo really isn't getting you anywhere.
I completely agree. And yeah, Indiana was just so prepared for just about everything Oregon had to throw at them in this ball game. Really, Oregon couldn't even really make the simple plays that they wanted to be able to make that they've been making all season. It's been difficult. And one more thing on this offense, regardless of the reason why, I think we can all agree, you got to be better than 3 touchdowns in 8 quarters. You've got to be better than 3 touchdowns in 8 quarters. Really quickly, before we get out of here, we've got a guest to get to here in the next 4 minutes or so. But one thing that I do want to be able to ask you about, Nick, is it's something this defense, has seemed to have an issue with in 3 of the last 4 games, which is allowing an opponent to really be able to kind of establish themselves late in ball games. Penn State did a really good job of it. Indiana did a fantastic job of it, especially with that long drive in the fourth quarter. Even Northwestern was able to do a really good job of being able to put their foot down a bit in the fourth quarter. If you're looking at this defense, what is something that you are doing, or you are trying to at least do, to limit what teams are doing against them in the fourth quarter?
Yeah, and again, without knowing how the health of the roster is and how guys are doing, that's obviously just, again, energy. By the end of the game, guys are sapped, and we've got guys working hard out there, and it all depends on who you can trust in your rotations, especially in those front 7 up there. And, if the guys aren't, putting in the work and ready to practice, then I can understand why coaches can't play them. But when those guys, are out there on the field for as long as Indiana was able to hold them, when your offense is not able to sustain long drives, defense is going to get tired, man, especially when you've got those big bodies out there. That's kind of one of the, there's the big advantage of having these big SEC type defensive linemen, but that's also the disadvantage when you get into that fourth quarter, man. Those guys, those big bodies are hard to lug around. Again, I don't question anybody's conditioning, but there's little things you can do in terms of, managing people's reps, and especially with doing that, guys get a little bit more energy when you need them in situational downs like passing downs. Utilizing great pass rushers on passing downs might be a key because, especially like Uyunglele, it's, he's getting near there so many times, but he's just kind of a step away on some of these big plays that could be big sacks, game-changing sacks. And, you have to wonder if that's because he's taking on more reps as a starter now full-time, or if that's just kind of been just how the games have shaken out this season.
Well, number 10 is definitely a guy that everybody's looking for as well. They know exactly how talented he is on that line. That being said, we mentioned it last week. This could be an opportunity for these edge guys to get out there and make some plays. The only sack of the game came on just an aggressive bull rush from Amari Washington. Besides that, Mendoza
was on the right guard's ass, actually.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Been there. Been there.
It's one of those situations where it's like, you don't want to. No, I don't think anybody's out. Like, nobody's doing a bad job, but sometimes you do need to see more out of some guys. And I think this is one of those times where that's probably the case. Just one more quick recap of the whole thing. Indiana, let's look at all the categories they won really quick. First downs, 23-14. Third down efficiency, 5 of 14, as opposed to Oregon's 3 of 14. Total yards, 326 to 267. They outpassed Oregon by just about 40 yards. They outran Oregon by just about 30 yards. Time of possession, they even won that too, Nick. This was a top to bottom. Let's just call it what it was. It was a loss. It was a loss for Oregon. Indiana, they deserve all the credit in the world. They came in and won a big game. But Nick, do you know what I consider a win? The fact that the last time Oregon lost their first game of the year at home in Autzen Stadium, the next week they went on the road, wore a whiteout, and got things right against UCLA in the year 2014. Another guy who knows a whole lot about bouncing back from one loss and having a great season is our upcoming guest. Why don't you tell him who it is?
All right, guys, give it up for, a former guest of the show. If you haven't already checked that episode, go back and look at it. Give it up for former Oregon Ducks wide receiver Keenan Howry. All right, I introduced him a little bit earlier as an Oregon wide receiver, but more importantly, guys, an Oregon legend, a 2-time first-team All-Pac-10 selection, and like the guy I would want right now returning a punt and trying to change this season's direction after a loss. Give it up, guys, for Keenan Howry, Oregon legend, and former.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me, man.
Former Once a Duck guest. I'm glad we can finally get you back on again. And I just wanted to, first and foremost, ask you about your experience with this season and even coming off the Indiana loss. How's it been for you as a former Duck watching and experiencing this season?
Oh man, all things aside from this last game, the season's been awesome to watch. Having the big win, excuse me, at Penn State, a couple weeks ago, and then, trying to come and play well against Indiana, who they have a lot to play for. They're ranked high, and they're coming into, a place that's hard for people to play in, and they played a really good game. We didn't play well that day, but yeah, the season's been awesome to experience, and I was able to get up to the game this past weekend, so that was even better.
Well, Keenan, that actually takes me exactly into what I wanted to ask you. And I saw that you were going to be going to the game. I reached out to Nick. I was like, hey, we got to make sure we get him back in here as soon as possible. And so I got to hear your reaction. Aside from the game, what was it like being back in Eugene, seeing how everything has changed? What really stuck out to you?
Yeah, this has been my first time back since 2014,
Wow.
when the 2001 team got inducted into the Oregon Sports Hall of Fame. So that was Mariota's last year, his Heisman year. So I haven't been back since, and that's just been because of just schedules don't align. And, I coach high school football, so it's like when we don't have a game, it seemed like the Ducks were always either away or they didn't have a game. So it just never worked out, but it was great to get back and seeing all the, the renovations that they're having done right now, and, adding a new practice field and seeing the facilities and seeing some old guys. It was and this was actually my first time experiencing a game in Austin sitting in the stands. So it was an amazing experience, and I'm just glad my kids and my family was able to be there with me.
Well, first before I ask my next question, I gotta talk to somebody in the athletic department. Why should you be in the stands? You should be right there on the field. If anything, they should have a set of shoulder pads and a helmet ready to go on special teams. But with that, not only that, I'm bummed I wasn't able to make it down because it was the alumni sports weekend. I'm sure you got to see a lot of guys. Give us maybe a shout out or two of a couple guys you were able to see there from the alumni back in your day or otherwise.
Yeah, I was able to see I think Kenny Farr, he runs the whole equipment room, so I was able to stop by and see him.
That's important.
Yeah, always gotta check in with Kenny. He's awesome. He does a great job there, man. I was able to see Coach Campbell. Hadn't seen him in a long time, so ran into him. And Jared Dillon, he was up there, and he's old guy from playing my freshman sophomore year, so saw him. But we were really running and gunning this whole couple days, so I actually wasn't able to get to a lot of the alumni stuff because we were just trying to squeeze in as much as you have two little kids, you can't be on time to anything. We were 8 deep. It was myself, my wife, my 2 kids, my cousin, and then my parents. So we're just trying to just get through as much as possible. So yeah, it was a great experience. I'm glad they were able to go, but I didn't really run into too many people because we were just, running and gunning the whole time.
Well, Keenan, we're so glad to hear that you were able to have a good time out there and enjoy Eugene, despite the result of this game. But we do want to ask you a little bit about this game and what you were able to see from this Oregon team. I know in our last segment, Nick and I talked a lot about the playmakers on this Oregon squad and how getting them the ball is going to be important moving on throughout the rest of the season. I would love to hear a little bit of your perspective on what you've seen from some of the playmakers this Oregon team has and how you would like to see them get more involved.
Yeah, I think, they do a great job. I think the OC Stein, he does a great job of giving them the ball. And I think Indiana kind of knew that. So a lot of their stuff was underneath coverage. They were playing some cover 2 coverage. They were playing a lot of shallow stuff and really trying to take away, all the quick stuff to where, I think these receivers are their best when they catch it and run with it after, and they did a good job of taking a lot of that away. And, and then when Oregon had to kind of push the ball down the field, they were kind of sitting ready for it. So it was a great defensive game plan for Indiana, and they did a great job of containing, Oregon outside of that, one kind of blown coverage there for that first touchdown. But, hey, you got to tip your hat to them, and, they played a great game. And, all you can do is just kind of, regroup, get back to the drawing board and hopefully come out this week and be focused and ready to go.
Yeah, in terms of that mentality, not only as a former Oregon great, but as a coach, what advice would you give to this team going on a long road trip after a big loss to try and rebound and regroup?
Yeah, it's just back to the drawing board, like I said, and you got to have a ton of focus, and, one thing that I've always kind of taken with me as, time has gone on as a player from college to NFL and now as a coach is that, just kind of get back to the small fundamentals and details, just start back in the drawing board. The season's not over. This isn't, the early 2000s or even in the 2010s where it's like you lose one game and, you pretty much can write your rest of your season off. There's still a lot to play for. Big Ten title still up for grabs, making the playoff is still I think if anything, Ohio State kind of shows you that it's you can lose, I mean, 2 games and still kind of have a great shot at winning the championship. So, but what it takes is you got to kind of get back to what you were doing well these first few weeks, what you were doing well in terms of from everything, catching, running, blocking, tackling, covering, everything. Just go back to the small details and build on some small wins and just kind of hopefully it builds from there.
After watching this game, Keenan, I did definitely go back and look at some other Oregon seasons in the past and see some times when this team in this program did bounce back. One of the ones that really stuck out to me was that 2001 season where you guys had a stumble against Stanford at home. And then in 2 of the next 3 weeks, you had to go on the road and play some really good teams, some ranked teams in some tough environments, going up to Pullman and then going down to the Rose Bowl to play UCLA a couple of weeks later. Kind of tell us a little bit about the mindset that you guys had bouncing back from that loss and then being able to carry that momentum through those tough games and into a Fiesta Bowl win.
Yeah, I think it was just kind of a reset, and like I said, back then, you lose that one game and it could really turn your season kind of completely over, but I think it was kind of good that we went through it. And now in hindsight, yeah, it sucked because that's the game that kept us out of the national championship. But at the end of the day, we didn't play bad against Stanford. We just had a couple of, kind of breakdowns on special teams, and it put us in bad spots. It put our defense in bad spots because offensively we were able to move the ball really well until we couldn't at the end. So we were able to kind of build on that, knowing like, hey, we can go out there and continue to move the ball and defense can stop people. We just need to tighten some things up. And I think going into the next game against Washington State up there, at night, in the cold, it was, it was sobering. I think everybody kind of came to the point and was like, hey, we the things can still break our way, and things did break our way. We just didn't get the benefit of the computers, and we had to just take one game at a time from that point on, because the rest of the season didn't matter if we didn't win the game that was in front of us. So it started Washington State, then it went to UCLA, and then we had the Civil War at the end. So yeah, like I said before, just having that kind of central focus on just kind of getting back to the basics is kind of what we did. And, we came out there and I think it probably helped us out because I don't know if we would have won that game against Stanford, how our mindset would have been going into that Washington State game, because Washington State came ready to play. And, it took everything, so we really had to we knew after the loss from last week that, we had to kind of button everything up and, it kind of helped us out.
In terms of buttoning everything up, that's something that is always so important when you go on the road, especially someplace you've never been before. And Oregon, never been to Rutgers, never even played Rutgers. I was sitting here recollecting with Sam, the furthest east I've been for a football game was Tennessee. Where's the furthest you've had to travel for a football game, whether college or pro, in 1 week? And what do you think the biggest tips are to not having that jet lag when you go out and try to perform at your highest level?
Yeah, so collegiately, the furthest we went was Michigan State my freshman year. So that was the first game of the season. Luckily, as everybody knows, with Oregon, we're on the quarter system, so we don't start school till almost October. So having to go out there, on a Thursday and play, it made it easy, And then professionally, the furthest east, probably just New York, playing the Giants. That's the first, but coming from Minnesota, it wasn't really that far of a trip, so it didn't really feel that long, So it's one of those things where you have to just kind of keep your routine, whatever it is, whatever you do, getting ready for home games, whatever you do, getting ready for road games, if that means the way you pack your bag or what you listen to in the car on the way and what seat you, because for the most part, I think a lot of athletes, whether they admit it or not, are a little bit superstitious and they like to keep a good thing going. So whatever they did for the Penn State game, I know, this is 2, cross country trips, in 3 weeks for them. So it's like, they already should be used to it. Having to play a tough Penn State team should get them ready for going out there to play Rutgers. So it's, just kind of keep back to what you did and just keep it all simple.
Folks, you can make sure and you are following him on social media. X, it's going to be KHow15. And of course, if you are on Instagram, you can find him just by searching the name Keenan Howry. Keenan, one thing that I really wanted to ask you, right, is about especially when it comes to these bounce back situations. Then once you get the ship right, once you've won that first game, right? Like you guys went to Washington State. It was a tough ball game. You got right there. And then you came home. You were able to take care of Arizona State. You're getting ready for a ranked UCLA that next week. Is that loss still in the back of your mind a little bit? Are you still kind of thinking, hey, anything can happen, we have to stay on track here? Or is it something that once you are kind of back where you're supposed to be, it's full steam ahead, you're just worried about that?
A little bit of both. I think you definitely love being able to get back on track and get back into the win column and kind of keep things moving. But in the back of your head, I think it's good that you kind of have to keep it there, right? Because one small slip up, one attention to detail mishap that you didn't have, like you weren't focused on, that causes you to not block the correct person on punt return, or not, block the correct person on PAT, or, miss a block in the run game or the pass game, whatever it is, like it sits in the back of your head and just kind of keeps you focused on, like, I can't let that happen again. I can't, I got to hold my water. I got to do whatever I got to do to kind of keep everything together. So we're going to that UCLA game, and, we're, most of the guys on the team, are from Southern California. So every chance we get to come back to LA is always awesome. But knowing that we had a lot to play for in this game, knowing that teams were losing and we were slowly moving back up, towards the top, stayed in our minds knowing that we wanted to play for a championship. And we still knew that, hey, playing for a Pac-10 championship is, in the tables and the cards. And, we're going to go out there. And, luckily for us, I think Deshaun Foster got suspended for that game, missed the rest of the season. And he didn't play, but it was still a tough game. Defense played well. We got some timely offense when we needed it, and was able to, pull out the victory at the end when they missed that field goal.
Now, Keenan, this is usually the point of the interview where one of us has to ask a uniform-related question, but you brought up something I just have to touch on that's even more important to me, because I still have my game day playlist as it is in its form today, right now, still on Spotify. I got to know two questions. What is one song that you had to have on your playlist back on the Discman or the Walkman or whatever it was back in the day, and one song that Coach Howry has now you would have never expected?
So I this dates me, but mine is still on, like, I had everything. This is, early 2000s, so everything was on Apple iTunes, and I had it on my iPod at the time. And the one song that I always had, no matter what, and I had to listen to it before the game, was and it's, probably a little faux pas to say it now, but it was Victory by Puff Daddy, or P Diddy, or Diddy Howry, whatever the names were back then. That was my one song that I always had to listen to. Not so much for the Diddy part, his verses or anything like that, but definitely for Biggie, and, the beat and the music just always got me going. That was the one thing. And like that's the funny thing about now, is I really don't listen to a lot of music now. Like, I listen to podcasts and when I'm driving in my car and on my way to do different things. So it's like, it's a little bit more calming. I'm already kind of fiery and on edge going to a game. So kind of getting fired up, going to a game where I have the coach probably isn't the best thing to do. So I'm trying to, trying to stay a little bit more calm these days when I'm on my way to games, so I don't lose it or fly off the handle too often. Coaching the defense is hard, so it is what it is.
Well, Keenan, one thing that I definitely wanted to ask you, because I'm going to leave the uniform question to Nick. He brought it up. He deserves to ask it after this, but it's something that I've been curious about. And for so many years through your era, and then even afterwards, Oregon was known for some really explosive special teams moments. And there were some things, especially on punt return, that you guys did that were a bit unique, that really led to a lot of success. I would love to be able to hear you just kind of break down a little bit what was said in those meetings, and what were some of the general strategies that you guys utilized to be so successful in those situations.
I think it just goes back to just having great special team coaches. My first 2 years, it was Coach Tom Osborne, not the Nebraska coach, but the longtime Oregon assistant, who did a great job of, being detail oriented and keeping everything how it was. So I think that kind of, even when he left, it kind of still seeped into the entirety of our special teams. And I can't speak for any other collegiate team, but I know that, playing in the NFL, there just wasn't the attention to detail in terms of, like, hey, this is how we're going to block on punt return. This is how we're going to block on kickoff return. This is how we're going to avoid blocks on punt and kickoff, and we had specific drills set up throughout the week on like, hey, this is for kick return, this is for kickoff. All the different special teams we had position specific drills that was going to help every position at every player at the position, so that it translated to the game. And that's what helped the most. In terms of punt return is, getting to your guy and just getting in the way. It doesn't have to be a great block. It doesn't have to be a decleater. It just get in his way and let the returners work. And I think that's one of the things that we've always did for special teams. Like I said, it was Coach Osborne, and for me, it was having a great teacher and Coach Rad back there with the returners and giving us the tools to kind of help us catch punts, catch kicks, and then hitting it downhill, and just not a lot of fluff when we were returning the balls. Just, hey, get the ball and go. He didn't like us running side to side. He just wanted us to hit it and go. But the funny thing that Coach Osborne used to always say, just about like, if we fair caught balls, it's like, hey, I can put an offensive lineman back there to fair catch punts. I'm putting you guys back there to do something in return. So I think having that mindset, and then being able to follow somebody like Michael Fletcher, who really didn't care about fair catching and just kind of went balls to the wall with it, no fear. It was when you take over after somebody like that, you can't go out there and kind of pussyfoot around. You got to catch it and go, and just kind of have no fear of the same. So I think it would have been a stark comparison to go out there if I'd have started catching calling fair catches after, Fletcher just went out there and was grinding for 2-yard returns and, getting blown up. But I mean, that was just our mentality. I think everybody on the 11, whoever it was, that was the big deal. We all took it personal. We tried to do our job the best we could.
Well, and shout out to Coach Oz. I know that was blocking with the tight ends and combos always got my piss hot. I always loved Coach Oz, and yeah, I was one of those linemen I was never telling him I'd fair catch it though. I don't know which of us would tell him that. No, we're taking it all the way, baby.
That's right.
Speaking of taking it all the way, we're gonna wrap it up here in a little bit. I got to get to the uniform question. We've obviously got your favorite uniform before, but with this season, we had the very unique shoe dog uniform. We're bringing back the marbled helmet this week. Got to get your opinions on what you thought of that as we debuted it.
Yeah, I think the uniforms are always great. I mean, I think we do some awesome jobs with the uniforms and with the combination selections. I mean, I think there were some questionable combo selections like back in the early years of Chip, but I think ever since then the selections have been good. They've been good combos. The colors have always worked together. I'm still waiting to see when we're going to have the my era uniform. That's the only era that we haven't worn yet. The 99 to 2002 uniform with the all green and all white. I'm still waiting for that. So whenever that happens, I'll be pumped up.
Well, we'll be sure to make sure that you get one of those throwbacks when they come out. I'm hoping they come out soon, because that's one of my favorites from back in the day. Keenan, we really appreciate you having on here. The last thing I'm just going to ask you, if you could have one word of advice or one statement for this Oregon team the rest of the season moving forward, what would you tell them? What do you have for them?
Yeah, if I had to tell them something, it would just be, like I said, attention to detail, right? There's no detail too small, no matter what it is. If it's, taking the right step, blocking the correct guy, using the correct technique, running the right route, the exact way it's supposed to be ran, taking your drop, whatever it is, there's no detail too small, because those little details add up. And if you start to, slack on your details, and all of a sudden you've created a huge deficit. So create gains, create wins with the details. And, when you get out there, it's, it's easy peasy, because you've been doing it the same way the whole time. So you got to keep it rolling. You got to do good to be good. So got to keep it going.
Well, thank you again for coming on and giving the Once a Duck audience all the little details that only a former Oregon legend and coach could provide. Thanks again for coming on with us, Keenan, and go Ducks.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Folks, it is always such a pleasure to be able to have on an Oregon legend like Keenan Howry joining us on the podcast. I think we both got a good takeaway from that, especially a guy who's been in these kind of situations before this Oregon team finds themselves in. And now, one of my favorite parts of the show, we get to hear what you guys think yourselves. We asked people on social media a little bit earlier on in the day to leave us a comment. We wanted to hear from you after falling at home last week. What is something this Oregon football team must do to get their head back on straight and bounce back on the road against Rutgers? Nick, I'm going to start this one off with one of our favorites, our guy T-Rod at Autzen Zoo member, somebody who I'm very excited to be able to see again in a couple of weeks for this Wisconsin matchup. He had a really solid one here, which is, play solid in all facets, and get out with a good win. Quarterback one needs to find his swagger. Go Ducks. I agree with that. After a little bit of a tough week, you definitely want to see a guy like Dante Moore get that swagger back, feel comfortable again. And I think if he does that, this Oregon team is going to be in a great spot.
Yeah, and shout out to T-Rod. I'll see y'all there on Wisconsin weekend. Up next, on Twitter, we got a response from Bryce Young, not the one you might be thinking of, but at byoung4282 says every game starts in the trenches, but I think the turnover battle should be an X factor. And I mean, that's kind of what we say almost every episode, but the turnover factor is going to be huge. If you're ever on the road and give up a turnover, man, or get one, that's a huge momentum shift for the crowd and either get them fired up or silenced.
I think you're completely right with that one. You know what? We say it every single week on the episode, and I will absolutely say it as many times as it needs to be said, Nick, because it is so true. That turnover battle, it is almost always an essential aspect of the game. Heading over to Instagram, where we got a couple of comments, one of which from a friend of the show, hoping to get him back on someday soon. Our friend Rob Beard reached out to us to let us know, get more yards on first down. I know we said it a couple of times throughout this episode. I could not agree more. That is something that this Oregon team needs to be able to do to put themselves in better, more advantageous situations on second and third.
Yeah, and shout out to Rob Beard, man. I wish we had him kicking that on. He's drilled some 58-yarders inside Autzen Stadium unofficially, I've seen, and that guy probably still has a boot. Going on, another Instagram response we got is from Ryan Pala. I'm gonna guess that's the pronunciation, but play with confidence. Seemed like the first snap of the game shattered that. And of course, that's, as an offensive lineman, that's exactly the first thing I thought. Is I immediately questioned how ready we were for this game when you give up a sack on the very first play. It's just, that's just, and the coaching is going to be on top of that this week, but even more so on the road, you have to go ahead and, like we said, it's going to be a tough road battle, but you've got to be able to take it, compartmentalize it, and bounce back.
But I'll tell you what, that sim pressure, it caused problems. They were able to get there throughout the game. Oregon handling that is for sure going to be a major key, not just this week, but the rest of the season. The final one we've got, Nick, the last one we're going to have on this episode at least. This is on Instagram from Rob Hartsdeck, and I just had to include this one just because it put a smile on my face when I see it, because there's nothing more true. Score more than them. Obviously, you want to score more points to win a game. Also, though, if we want to look at it a bit deeper, this Oregon team needs to be scoring more in general. This is a team that needs to be establishing themselves offensively in a very real way. So yes, obviously you want to score more points to win the game, but also this is an offense that needs to get into the end zone a bit this week. They need to build up that confidence. 3 touchdowns in 8 quarters ain't going to do it all season long. That's really not going to do it at any point during any season. Want to see more, got to see more, have a feeling we'll see more.
Got to see more. When you've got the number 1 quarterback on Mel Kiper's way too early big board, you got to go and show it. And I think that this is an opportunity for our entire offense and our entire team to go on the road and show it.
Well, Nick, it's time to get into this matchup with Rutgers. Oregon has this coming Saturday, 3:30 p.m. Pacific Coast time on the Big Ten Network. And this is going to be the first ever matchup between the Oregon Ducks and the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, the team that's been playing college football longer than anybody else. When they do throwback jerseys, it's not just leather helmets. They got to put sleeves on those sweatshirts too. That's how old of a team we're talking about here. This is a team, they are currently right now sitting at a record of 3-3. They won their first 3 games, have stumbled in the last 3 against Big Ten opponents. They do have some players that can cause some problems. Before we get into any of that, what was the furthest you ever had to travel for a road game in an Oregon uniform?
Ooh, Tennessee had to be. Tennessee was the furthest east, definitely, and yeah, good old Rocky Top. Woo, Rocky Top, Tennessee. Yeah. Not only that though, they're literally rolling out the red carpet, not just because they're the Scarlet Knights, but because it's their homecoming and family weekend here, with our first trip to SHI Stadium. So very interesting. They're making a big deal out of it, and obviously they're looking for that first Big Ten win, and they would love to do it against a reeling Oregon team, especially after they saw the lowly UCLA Bruins get out of their slump and go ahead and start a little run of their own. So yeah, they'd probably love to emulate the same thing and make Oregon the next Penn State.
Well, I think any college football team out there that watched that UCLA game, the last couple of UCLA games, in fact, they've got to be feeling like Kevin Garnett right now. Anything is possible, and this is the sport to do it in, man. And now this Rutgers team, I think a lot of folks, besides the ones who weren't completely locked into that Mariners game on Friday night the way I was, were able to check out some of that Rutgers Washington game. I went back and rewatched it, and I did see some things that this Rutgers team does that could really be a problem for this Oregon team. Two of them being a really talented running back and some big, strong receivers who are good at bringing down the 50-50 ball on the outside. I'm curious if you were able to see any of that game, or if you've seen anything from this Rutgers team and what you think they can kind of present a little bit for Oregon.
Yeah, I saw a couple clips and was watching bits and parts of the UW game, did my typical Seattle efforts to root against anything and all things Huskies. And
gotta hate watch.
You got to. And at least I do feel like this is a team that, don't let the record fool you. They've been on the cusp of being a real problem for some teams, and including that Washington game. But I think, again, with the loss of Oregon and the travel, that is one of the things I think we're going to have to, anticipate being one of the biggest problems, because of the fact I've never had to do that. I don't know any other Oregon team. There's probably at least one or two comparisons of something similar, but it's just very difficult to come off a game day game and then travel across the country already. And then you're dealing with a team that right now is just fiending for a win in this conference. It's going to be a tough challenge, and I'm excited to see how Oregon attacks it.
Travel-wise, the only game that I can really think to compare it to, and it might not even be totally fair because of the time setup, but when Oregon had to travel, I believe it was the year after you'd graduated, to Virginia. That's a trip that's like, yeah, that's a tough cross-country trip to make. They had played a late-night game against Arkansas State the day before, week before. My God, I said every increment of time except for a week. I hit all of them. Played Arkansas State in a night game the week before, then had to travel, play what would be on the West Coast, a 9 a.m. kickoff at Virginia. And what did Oregon do? They came out, they absolutely blew the doors off in that game. I believe the second play of the game was Marcus Mariota running for about a 70-yard pickup in that one. Travel-wise, though, this is the new Big Ten. This is the new landscape of college football. This is the kind of thing you're going to have to do. The only lucky part about it, Rutgers was just on the West Coast on Friday playing at Washington, so they had a very similar trip, even if it was a good few days before Oregon's going to make that trip themselves. Watching that game against Washington, though, a couple of things that stuck out to me. Number one, Dan Lanning brought him up as a player who's really good and can be a problem, and I kind of agree that he can be. It's the running back Antoine Raymond, only a sophomore, 5'11", 205 pounds, from Montreal. Canadian back out here getting things done. There are going to be CFL teams absolutely clamoring to be able to use one of those homegrown roster spots on him. And he's been really, really solid this season. In his first year, splitting carries, he had 100 of them last year, 457 yards, 8 touchdowns, as well as 3 receptions, 44 yards. This season, all of those numbers are way up. Through 6 games, he's already had 102 carries, 560 yards, averaging 5.5 yards per carry. He's got 9 touchdowns. He's also got 11 receptions for 131 yards and a touchdown. He's dynamic out of the backfield in multiple different ways, and he's somebody Oregon is going to have to keep their eyes on. They've done a decent job against the run so far this season. This might be one of the most talented guys they've seen, though.
Yeah, and especially again, dealing with what we've put on tape there, that Rutgers is going to be looking to do a lot of the same things Indiana was doing, and especially with the home field advantage, they won't have to deal with potentially the penalties that were incurred. So, yeah, when you look at that right there, that's again, and you have to be excited for the opportunity Coach Lanning has to go ahead and coach these guys up and really see if we can rebound.
And another thing that I think this team does really, really well, and Oregon has to watch out for, right? When you look back at who the leading tacklers were in that game against Indiana, the first one is obviously Bryce Bedger. You know how he gets side to side. But beyond that, it was Dylan Thieneman and Aaron Flowers. Meaning that there were definitely some plays getting to the second level for that Indiana team. And that was something that Rutgers was actually doing really well early in the game against Washington. They had quite a few big plays, including a 51-yard run from Raymond that they really had to kind of bounce back from. Washington did. And so I genuinely say, hey, if this is going to be another game where your linebackers aren't taking care of business the way they should be, if you're not being able to stuff things at the line of scrimmage, it could be a tough one. And they have the opportunity to do so. Also, you mentioned doing things that Indiana did. They've got players that can do so. Ian Strong is the one that comes to mind. He had 7 catches, 124 yards in that game against Washington. Another guy, KJ Duff, he only had 3 catches, 59 yards, as well as an absolute mossing of a Washington defender reaching up over the top of him. Jeff Mayle against Portland State style to pull in a touchdown. They're going to go after the 50-50 ball in this game, and they trust their guys to come down with it. If we learned anything from that Indiana game, if you're not attacking Brandon Finney Jr., could be a problem on the other side.
Yeah, and one thing, you brought up there was a lot of times in the Indiana game where it's squared up one-on-one. Safety has to make a tackle on an untouched back. You don't want that necessarily because it means, if you aren't getting contacted, those front 7 on the running back, they schemed you up. You weren't able to get off blocks and you weren't able to actually hold gap integrity. So whenever they're able to scheme that up, man, unless you have a Javon Holland back there, it's probably not going to be a win for your defense, as we saw multiple times on the goal line. It's just really, really tough to fit up and get a stop in those situations when your responsibility is so many things at safety that going up and shutting down the run isn't necessarily your first responsibility until you realize that you're the last line of defense. So again, if we can keep ourselves out of those situations, I feel really, really good about it. But you have to cause chaos on your defensive front, and we needed a lot more of that against Indiana, and hopefully we can bring that on the road with us to Rutgers.
Well, there's a guy you're going to have to disrupt in that game is their quarterback. Another guy who I think is a pretty talented guy. Let's see if we get this name right. Athan Kaliakamenis. He is a ball player, man. 6'3", 212 pounds, number 16 out there, a senior. He's been solid this season. So far on the year, 138 for 209. That's 66% completion percentage, or 2 out of 3 balls he's thrown. 1,785 yards so far, 11 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. That's a pretty good ratio he has going on right there. That's some solid work out of him. Almost a 4-to-1 interception to touchdown to interception ratio. And this is a guy, another transfer quarterback, as we often see in college football. He started his career playing at Minnesota, came over to play with the Scarlet Knights. And there were some moments where he was delivering some really nice balls, especially outside deep balls against that Washington defense. Oregon's going to have to look out for that. Keeping him or making him uncomfortable is going to be really big in this ballgame.
Yeah, and another thing that's big in this ball game is when you look at the injury report for both teams, man, this Rutgers team makes me feel pretty good about where we're at this season. We lost, a starting number 1 wide receiver before the season. Rutgers has a lot of guys on their injury report, and as we know with college injuries, all into undisclosed. They're not going to tell us exactly what's going on. So, but there's always that potential there for somebody to be coming back or for just so many guys to be out. But it's crazy to know, again, just looking back in the last week or so, how many guys are hurt after that Washington game, especially.
Yeah, and that was a game that definitely took a toll. Right now, we again, because we don't have an official everybody, we know who's going to be out, we know who's going to be missing yet, as they tend not to do with college football. We can just assume that, hey, I'm going to treat it as if all their best players are playing. If they don't end up playing, great, awesome. That's one more helpful thing come our week. Hopefully they are healthy and ready to go by the next week. But as for right now, all you can assume is that they're going to be bringing their best. And speaking of bringing their best, this is a team who is coached by a defensive guy. And I'm very curious to see how he attacks this Oregon offense that has now shown in this last game, hey, there are some things that make us uncomfortable. There are some things that can beat us. Greg Schiano is a really good coach. He's a really good coach, man. He was the defensive coordinator for those Miami teams at the beginning of the 2000s that were really, really good. He coached Rutgers for 10 years during the 2000s and what were probably some of their best years. Then what did he do? Went on to coach the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for a couple of years. I believe won a national championship, or at least appeared in several playoffs with the Ohio State Buckeyes from 2016 to 2018. Now for the last few years, he's been back coaching at Rutgers. I'm very, very intrigued to be able to see what he and his defense does to make this Oregon team uncomfortable, because I would be really shocked if he's not reaching deep into that experienced DC bag to go do some interesting things against Oregon.
I don't even think you need to go that far in the DC bag. I would do exactly kind of what Oregon was doing to disrupt Indiana in terms of defensive line. I would expect, if I was looking at this offensive line, I would want to get them out of rhythm and out of sync with the quarterback pre-play as much as possible, because you already know if you come off a game with 6 sacks, what are they going to be preaching all week? We can't have any more sacks. We can't have any more sacks. And as soon as you get that first pressure on the quarterback, they're just going to be losing their shit on the sidelines. I know it because I've been there. And I'm telling you right now, the most important thing is, if I'm this Oregon team going out on the road, you did a great job holding your water at Penn State, everybody being on the same page, but you were anticipating the whiteout. You have to treat every one of those games like a whiteout from here on out. Every one of those road games, because you are going to get everybody's best effort to try and embarrass you and get you off sides. And now I would anticipate, if Schiano's seen the tape, I would go ahead and do exactly what Oregon was getting almost warned for on the shifts pre-play. If you do that with a defensive line, God, it causes so many things for the offensive linemen to have to rethink or scheme, especially if you are on the road in a loud environment and you're looking at the ball for the snap. These are the kinds of things that, I probably shouldn't be putting all this out there. I'm sure Coach Schiano isn't going to be looking to once a duck for any tips, but I'm telling you, if I'm an offensive lineman and I saw my team just doing that, and I know I'm going against a defensive coach who's watching the entire game film, I'm sure he's looking at that going, yeah, that would work against them.
I tend to agree with you right there. I think that he's definitely, and I mean, we know he's watching the tape. We know he's checking that out. We don't necessarily know if he's listening to this podcast, but we do know that he's doing his research and getting these things right. And I think one thing that you have to recognize is that Indiana was able to do a lot with their interior defensive line, and Rutgers has some guys on that interior defensive line that can cause some problems. Their leading sacker so far this year is Bradley Weaver, a 6'4", 267-pound defensive lineman, big number 94 right there. You're going to have to look out for him. Another guy on that defensive line who's been a problem, Eric O'Neill so far, another senior, 6'3", 261 pounds, big number 99. He's got a sack and a half so far this season. Rutgers, they might not have been able to bring pressure all season the same way that Indiana has, and they're doing it in a very different way, whereas Indiana loved to bring those linebackers, love to have all of those guys cause problems, love to be able to drop a lineman or two to be able to fill those spaces in the zone blitz that you like to be able to fill. This Rutgers team, they're trying to do it a whole lot more by just smashing you right in the face and coming straight through you. It's something that they were doing pretty successfully against Washington too, and if it weren't for them having a really, let's be honest, we hate giving Washington credit, a really top-tier mobile quarterback, there would have been a lot more sacks for them in that game.
Yeah, it definitely feels like the mobility of Dante is going to be a huge weapon in this game. And hopefully, again, he was taking some shots at the end of the game where you're sitting there and going, oh, well, hope he ices up and recovers well, because it's going to be tough to get your legs back after taking 6 sacks in one game. So that's going to be a huge, huge key to this game, because, yeah, they want to get right after you on the defensive front and with the pressures that they bring in. Even without the pressures, again, you're coming off a game where the quarterback is going to have to build that confidence early and get it back. That's what again, when you have a second half like that and things just aren't clicking and you go on the road, it's so important that first drive we scheme up and have scripted out is something that we go out and have not only are effective with, but don't have those negative penalties, the sacks. Just really got to go out and execute on that first drive to build that confidence and momentum back we had the first 5 games of this season.
Well, you know what? I do trust this Oregon's team ability to do that. It does seem as if throughout Dan Lanning's tenure, this has been a team that's done a good job of bouncing back in big moments when they've needed to. You look at how they responded after that very first loss to Georgia. They rattled off a bunch of wins in a row that season. Then what did they do? They ended up having a loss to Washington, came back and upset Utah the next week in a game where they necessarily weren't supposed to be able to do anything, especially with an injured Bo Nix. You look at Oregon the following season, it's a team that, they lost to Washington, and what do? They didn't lose again until they played Washington, but they bounced back very well. This has been an Oregon team that hasn't really suffered from hangovers, and that's something that I'm hoping can be very helpful in this coming ball game. This is one where, frankly, that you have better athletes. That you have probably more skilled guys out there. You have to outwork them, though. You absolutely have to outwork these guys. That was one of the biggest things against Indiana, was there was a thing like, yeah, they're working for every single one of these little 50-50 moments and getting the majority of them. You need to be able to be the team that's not only talented, but is also fighting for and winning as many of those moments as possible.
Yeah. Well, and again, just the mentality that Indiana had going into the environment, that's what we need to learn a lot from. And again, we went into Penn State, but you can easily just say, hey, that's, all the anticipation of the moment. To be able to bring that to a place like Rutgers that you haven't been before, you're unfamiliar with in terms of ever matching up with this team, and you're going to learn as you go. It's like everything they could have known and prepared for in the whiteout was laid out in front of them. Now, kind of exploring the unknown, and of course they've got people on it, the research, and they're going to have every little kind of idea for how to prepare this team and motivate them and get them there and make sure that the Scarlet Knights are as familiar territory as you can get on the road. But again, the difference in travel, they're probably going to do some scheduling things a little bit differently this week, I'd have to imagine. And then on top of it, we are in the academic year now, so it is something that's a little bit different than when you played Penn State, when you're just kicking up the students being back. Now you're kind of in the full swing of school, so it's very interesting to see how teams are able to manage all of that. And it's one of those things that obviously we don't talk about on the ESPNs or even most podcasts. People do not really remember, because hopefully most of these student athletes that are playing are having a light course load. But when you travel to Rutgers on a week that, maybe you have a midterm or something, like, I can only imagine what that's like, and having to balance those things early in the week, and how that manages with your practices and the things you're trying to do in terms of physical recovery. Those are the things that don't often get talked about, and that thankfully Oregon is on the high end of like not just providing those things, but educating the players on the best way to take care of themselves.
Well, I will say, timing-wise, scheduling-wise, I do love that this game is 3:30 Pacific time. It's going to be 6:30 over there, but 3:30 Pacific time is big time for this kind of game. Being able to go out there and play at a time that is going to feel normal. It'll feel all right. It won't be one of those 9 a.m. situations, and it won't be one of those sit around and wait for it all day situations, because you would at least hope that they're able to keep their bodies somewhat on a West Coast schedule. Maybe you wake up a little later, you get over to the stadium at the time you normally would, and then you're feeling all right. You're feeling good to go for that ball game. Also, I'm very excited to see the atmosphere for this game. You mentioned that it's homecoming. You mentioned that it's family weekend. This is a Scarlet out. Everybody's wearing red. This is going to be a fun one. Last year against Wisconsin, their Scarlet out wore red head to toe. It was a fun ball game. That's the kind of atmosphere that they're going to want to bring to this one. They're going to be loud, man. It's a top 10 team in the country coming to town. It's going to be a fun atmosphere. It's going to be a fun environment. And the best thing you can do if you're Oregon is quiet it down as soon as possible. Let the little tiny pocket of green that's going to be somewhere in that stadium get as loud as they can and have as much fun as they can. Let our friends who are traveling out there enjoy themselves as much as possible. You got a chance to really be able to right the ship in this ball game. You got a chance to get your head screwed back on straight, the way our mascot has a few times over the last couple of years. Now is going to be a really good opportunity to see, okay, how does this Oregon team bounce back? How do they recover from these kind of situations? Because in college football, it's always going to be necessary.
Yeah, and I am excited you mentioned it. I want to see not just the fans that travel, but this is the first time I know a lot of New York, New Jersey Ducks get a chance to go to a game that isn't going to require traveling cross country. So it's going to be very cool to see. I think the I think most people underestimate the, national influence that this team has. And I think there's gonna be a lot more green jerseys than we're expecting, which is gonna be really cool. And maybe some yellow ones, some black ones, some nightmare green ones. Whoever knows? But the brand's out there, and I know we have a ton of, at least including podcast fans that are at least from out in the Northeast area, that I hope are able to travel out and get there and help support our Ducks. Because yeah, I mean, I would love if by the end we have those guys filtering down, celebrating with our Ducks like Indiana was able to in Autzen Stadium, because sure feels a lot better ending with your own fans celebrating than the opposing team.
I mean, I completely, I'm right there with you, Nick. I don't know. I don't know if there's a better way to put it besides, I'd rather be happy at the end of this than not be happy at the end of this. Yeah, man, you're absolutely right about that. Before we get out of here, I do want to be able to ask you a few things. Number one, you've got this matchup with Rutgers, a team that has done a pretty good job putting up points this season. They were averaging a metric crap load through their first 3 games of the season against Ohio, Miami, Ohio, and Norfolk State. I've brought it back down to earth a little bit against Iowa and Minnesota, scoring 28 in each of those games, and then being held to 19 against Washington. Regardless, though, we talked about some of the weapons they have on offense. So let's start with the defensive keys to the game for you.
Oh man, obviously, like I've said, you've got to create disruption with your front seven. Getting the quarterback as soon as he releases the ball just isn't good enough. We've got to get there to disrupt this passing offense. The easiest way is to not let him get it off and be able to create disruption in the backfield, and also containment. As soon as things do break down, you can't let the quarterback be able to have just open yards to just walk for a first down. Got to be able to get downfield and follow through, maintain your passing rush lanes. In terms of, defensive backs, especially now that you don't have the home field advantage, guys got to get the hands off a little bit more. It's been, that last game, it was a couple times where you're just kind of sitting there going, we got away with one. We got away with one. You get away with too many. And guys, the refs watch the film too. The refs are going to be clued in. The coaches are going to be telling the other refs what to look for. So you aren't going to get away with quite as many in this game, I think, after that last one. And then ultimately in that defensive backfield at safety in particular, again, we want all those guys to be as good as solo tacklers, as you mentioned earlier in the show. Brandon Finney Jr. was. God, if you get a one-on-one matchup and you're able to make a tackle, go out there and stop them right on contact, drive the feet. Don't stop. Don't let them hit you. Be the hammer, not the nail. And I think that's the biggest thing that I saw. Sometimes we were on our heels making tackles against Indiana, and that's typically not something that your coach, it's usually just you weren't prepared for it. You were caught off guard. So again, trust your preparation, and again, run to those tackles and run through those tackles, because too many times if you're caught off guard, those guys are going to break the tackle, if not carry you with them for the extra yardage.
Switching over to the offensive side of the ball, taking a look at this Rutgers defense. They've got a really good mind coaching them, but they have given up some points this season. In fact, 4 of their 6 games so far, they have given up more than 30 points in the ball game. If you're Oregon's offense, if you're Will Stein, what are the keys to being able to take advantage of what Rutgers is giving you?
Get yards on first down, make it easier for yourself on second down, and protect your quarterback. I mean, we said the same things, but protect the football as well last week. But again, I think this team is pretty good with securing the rock. I want to, knock on wood, say that will still continue to be an emphasis. But man, you have to keep your quarterback safe and comfortable in the pocket, because if you don't, later in the game, that's how they miss those downfield throws that are wide open. We've been setting up the entire game. And when you go back and you watch the film on that, you see a lot of opportunities that Oregon could have made this game a blowout. And unfortunately, as soon as the first play starts and you get a sack, there's that little bit of hesitancy that if your quarterback can't trust being in the pocket, knows he's going to get hit before he's even going to get hit, the timing is already off. And we saw that at least with Indiana, timing was everything.
Yeah, I think we all know exactly the player talking about. Gary Bryant Jr. was wide the heck open.
There was a couple, but might have been even 50-50 balls with some of our talent. That's a chance you take because we have the athletes outside.
Well, exactly. And I mean, especially at the tight end position, one thing that I'll add keys to the game, at least offensively, get your star, potentially first, second round picks involved in the freaking game, man. Get these guys involved. When Oregon's offense has been at its best this season, it's because 18's been touching the ball. It's because they've been getting the ball to number 1. They've been getting the ball to number 2. And those things were just not happening at the rate they needed to happen.
If I were scheming it up, if I were Will Stein, I'd go back and look at the 2009 Cal tape, and I would do exactly what we did to get Ed Dixon the ball, because it felt like at that point in the season we said, all right, Cal has a little bit of trouble handling the tight end, and Ed really haven't been using him as much as we'd like to. So we had everything in the game plan. And I remember, I think he had a 40, 50-yard touchdown on a tight end screen that was just like, hey, you're not having to do too much. The line's going to do a lot of the work. You're letting this guy that's an amazing athlete just get the ball with blockers in front of him. And sometimes that's all you need. It doesn't have to be all that complicated.
Masoli pump fake was dangerous too. My goodness, he made everybody bite on that.
Fake tunnel screen, come back to the tight end screen. Yeah, I like it. Will, you don't need to tip me anything, but I would love a shout out eventually if you put that in the playbook this week.
I also just think there's an entire portion of this Oregon fan base that would just be so excited to see a fake screen as opposed to a real screen. Even though both of us, we do recognize the value. Nobody here is saying that it's something that you need to completely eliminate. But I think that there would be a good portion of this fan base that'd be like, oh man, moving it downfield, north and south. What a novel concept, man. This is a beautiful thing to look at. And I do hope, and I do think Oregon will try to do that a little bit more in this game. I mean, you always say block out the noise and everything like that, but sometimes the noise isn't totally wrong. And this could be one of those chances where, hey, we should acknowledge we should be getting that ball in the end zone a whole lot more over a 2-game stretch than they have been. I will say, though, I'm looking forward to seeing this one. I do kind of believe this Oregon team is going to be able to bounce back in a way that at least is satisfying enough for all of us, whether it's necessarily the 59-0 game that I'm sure would make all of our hearts swell with joy. I do see this Oregon team, at least in some ways, at least in most ways, being able to bounce back in this one. But Nick, while we still have a few minutes, we should probably get into prediction time. I'd love to hear from you. What do you see happening within the flow of this game? And then finally, what's our final score?
Yeah, well, I realized, and I mentioned after last week, I am not as familiar with betting odds as I probably should be for understanding the public perception that a podcaster needs to be aware of. So did a little research, and as
we're not sponsored by DraftKings, it does not matter.
No, not yet. But I did do a little bit of research for once. Usually that's your deal. But again, I was looking up, and as of recording, the over-under total points is about 60, and they had Oregon 17-point favorites or so, which to me, after a loss like that and going cross country, seems a little bit odd. And I know that all the statistics would tell you take the under, but man, I love this Oregon team. I still trust them. I believe in Coach Dan Lanning. And again, it feels like this is a great learning opportunity and a course correction opportunity early in the season. And as we saw from Ohio State last year, it's not necessarily the worst thing to happen mid-season. So if the other team plays the game of their lives and isn't able to replicate it again, I hope we get to see you down in December or January. So with that, I'm going to say I think this Oregon offense comes out, gets lit on fire, ends up kind of slowing it down in the fourth quarter, but I think it's going to be Duckies 45, Scarlet Knights 24.
I really like that prediction, and just doing the quick mental math in my head, which, hey, I'm a Bachelor of Arts. I'm not necessarily good at math by any means, but I can tell you from what the experts are saying, it does seem as if they're predicting about a 38-21 kind of ball game. I think Oregon's able to do just a little bit better than that one. I agree the travel is going to be tough on them. Going across the country is not easy for anybody, man. For some reason, unless you're weirdly enough the Seattle Seahawks to do it better than anybody else, it is tough to make that cross-country trip for just about any team. I do think Oregon wins this one, and I do feel okay, but I'm going to go with a 41-16 ball game. I think that this offense is really going to hammer on a couple of things. Number one, I think that they're going to do a good job of keeping this Rutgers team out of the end zone for the most part. I do see, I was between 17 and 16 on this one, and I went with 16 just because I thought not even so much that Oregon would force all those field goals, but there'd probably be a time where Rutgers was trying to go for two where that might get stopped. Yeah. But I could see this one being about at that point in Oregon. I really see them being able to score touchdowns as well as they need to. And also, I do feel that Dan Lanning's the type to want to get his kickers a little bit more confident, so I wouldn't be surprised. There were some opportunities, especially a little later in this game, where you might have a shorter fourth down that they instead go, you know what? Let Sappington put it through. Let him feel better about this one. You know, he's been hearing it from everybody this week. Let's get on the right page there.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that because it's something I've definitely been thinking about is, yeah, it's such a difficult thing how you manage your kicker and that confidence. And I think especially the mentality of a defensive head coach is a little bit different than that of an offensive head coach. And it is going to be interesting to see how much we utilize it because I think, again, in the past, Oregon has been such primarily an offensive driven coaching staff from the head coaching ever since I was there and long before. But I think when you're an offensive coach and you start having a little mistrust in your kicker, you go the complete opposite direction. You start scheming up more fourth down plays and more 2-point conversions. And I think a defensive coach is definitely going to be much more leaning into how do we get this kicker back into his rhythm, back into his routine, and confident in his ability to be consistent.
But I will say, I think there's something that stuck out to me, especially on the rewatch, was that the reaction to the missed kick was surprise. It wasn't necessarily like, oh, it happened again. Here we are again. It wasn't the way that there were some reactions, especially in your days, to some missed kicks. It was a whole lot more of yeah, exactly. Sort of a reaction of the thing that we all thought could very possibly happen happened. It wasn't that. It was a lot more of Dan Atticus being like, we missed this one? Yeah. We don't usually miss this one. And I think that confidence is a good thing, and I think that confidence carries over. I think they give him some extra shots at it, and I think he knocks him down in this game.
Yeah. It was like, oh, you did get the GameWorks watch party. You know, a lot of folks there a little bit older than myself, and we're kind of all looking around going, oh, no, it's back. It's back.
Nick, did it ever really leave?
Yeah, I think I think that 2023 Washington game would or in 2024 and yeah, there's a couple there that would it certainly enthused me to think, but I thought once we got Atticus it was gone, babe. And again, I believe it's just one of those. You said the look of surprise was the same thing everybody had until we looked around and went, oh man, I remember this feeling. Mm-hmm. I don't like this feeling. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but
wide left on that side of the field's never fun.
Oregon fans, we there's just some things you just can't get certain levels of pessimism out of us, and that it's going to always be with third down calls on offense or defense, and then kickers.
That's a pretty good way to describe it right there. Well, we both have this Oregon team bouncing back big. I think that it's going to be a fun one to watch. I'm very excited. Once again, folks, that'll be 3:30 Pacific time, 6:30 where they're kicking it off on the Big Ten Network. This is Oregon's required conference game on the Big Ten Network. Every single team has to play at least one. If you're Rutgers or Northwestern, you're probably going to play a few more than that. But regardless, it's going to be a fun one to watch. I'm looking forward to this ball game. And once again, Nick, they can follow you at Nick R. Cody on all the social medias. They can follow me at Samuel101TS. There'll probably be some uniform/scenario significant highlights coming out a couple days ago, actually, if we're going to be checking it out. But if you want to use a phrase I love, which is the Terminator timeline, that'll be coming out here in just a couple of hours. One thing I will say about this ball game, a lot of travel, but you mentioned it. Those New York Duck fans are for real. There's a whole lot of alumni that end up out there. I'm really excited that they get to check out this team live and in person via just a drive across a bridge or under a tunnel, whichever is necessary to get over to where this game is being played. And I'm really excited for the entire East Coast to be able to see this Oregon team. A lot of folks who've never been able to watch the Oregon Ducks play before are going to get a chance to see them on Saturday. Nick, it's time to get out of here. It's time to let these people get on their way. Go listen to all their other podcasts, watch all their other shows, and get ready for this upcoming ball game.
Yeah.
Before we get out of here, though, tell the people what they need to know.
I'm just glad we wrapped it up before I get overtaken by this last bit of October sunlight in Seattle.
It's coming for you.
And I'm going to melt away soon after if we don't wrap this up. So as you guys always know, once a duck, always a duck. Thanks for sticking around. Ooh, let us know. Wow. The glow the glow in the darko. All right.
There it is.
I think oh man, this might be the rapture for me, guys. I am nope. All right. No, that wasn't it. Next time though, see you guys, and comment down below with your game prediction and anything else you guys want to see on our next episode. Go Ducks.